Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome back to the Onyx Tavern Vlog series on Ressha Sentai ToQger. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, and today we're going to be discussing station number 31, the Hyper Ressha Terminal. Now, I really like this episode, obviously because it's not filler, and it actually has something to do with the overall plot and the story. Because a lot of great things happen in this episode. I mean, not only do we have a great action sequence between all of our villains and Wright, not only do we have new revelations, a mystery setup, a cliffhanger ending, but we have a new set piece. We have a new location, what's eventually going to become a new Zord within the series, a new character that's introduced in the present of the Rainbow Line. Again, some mystery that's happening. There is a lot that is going on in this episode, and I want to talk to you guys about the good things in this episode, which really have everything to do with the plot and what's moving forward. And I do have some questions about the episode, not so much things that I don't like, but things I just don't particularly understand that this episode, as a standalone, is not really answering. But let's go ahead and talk about the good things first. First of all, I think it was a great battle sequence that we had with the little royale that was going on with all of our characters. I mean, frankly, the way it was done, it kind of looked like a Super Smash Brothers battle, because we had like 5 different people going against each other. We had Mork, we had Madam, we had Zet, we had Schwartz, we had Wright, we had all these guys fighting each other. And the thing that made it really good is that it wasn't just fighting for fighting's sake. That's a lot of criticism people have, I think, with Power Rangers and other action franchises, is that they just fight because they're fight. There's no motivation behind it. But I would say in this episode, each character has a particular motivation, whether it is clear or not to the audience, of why they are fighting whom for what reason. Because we do see that Madam is taking a strike against Mork in the episode, which she says was an accident, but she wants to get Mork out of the way. We see Schwartz fighting against Zet because he wants revenge for Glitter and all that. There's a lot that's going on right there other than just fighting. And of course, with the fighting, we have that great location. That's the best thing about it, is that we've had all these cityscape locations, these forest locations. We've had rock quarries and stuff. But here we actually have an interior location that actually looks like it's within a train station. And it's really cool. You know, there's multiple levels to it. It looks a little cramped. It's just something that we haven't really seen before outside maybe a major motion picture, and I think it really breathed life into the scene that we have this new location that's not someplace that we've always been. Now, granted, when we have the Rangers fighting against the table and chair shadows, then yeah, that's kind of generic, you know, we've seen that before, but this particular location I've never seen them film in, and it was just really interesting to see them do that. Also in this battle, Wright basically, after he saves a little girl from Zet, who's basically telling everybody to shut up and, just attacking everybody, he kind of he brings up the fact that he has been holding back when fighting against Zet. And the thing is, I had this belief back in episode 12, which this episode references a number of times, is Zet's first introduction. I had this kind of thought to myself that Zet is eventually going to turn into a good guy because, hey, there's going to be ToQger or whatever and stuff like that, and, he's going to go to the good side. Just there's something good about Zet that eventually will shine through at the end of the series, pun intended or whatever, because, again, his interest in the light. And it seems that Wright and I had the same idea, that Wright believed obviously there was some good in him, so he's kind of been holding back when he fights Zet. But when he realizes that he was just going to kill this girl for absolutely no reason, Wright says, I'm not going to hold back anymore because what you're doing is completely wrong, so let's have at it, Hoss. That's basically what he is saying to Zet. Now, I wish they could have defined it a little bit more, because again, that's just kind of my speculation, that Wright felt there was some good in him, and maybe he can bring him over to the Rainbow Line, much in the same way that Kira did. But again, that's not expanded upon within that particular scene. Since this is essentially part one of a two-parter, maybe that will be explored within the second episode, or hopefully somewhere down the line. But I think that Wright, like I, sees the potential in Zet on being a good guy, and that's probably what he originally thought, and now that's no longer the case. He no longer thinks there's probably salvation or hope for Zet, that he is such a monster that he can't be saved. Maybe that's what it is. I kind of hope not, because again, I like Zet as a character. He is the most interesting of the villains, maybe aside from Schwartz. And actually, Schwartz finds out in this episode that Glitter is still alive, so it completely changes his motivation and plans now to where, yes, he does want to go ahead and get revenge on Zet, and he still wants to accumulate power, but now it seems like he might have the potential to save Glitter, and I want to see what he does with that information. Let's see. This episode also introduces, has our first appearance of the Rainbow Line president. Now, it's interesting that it's almost Easter. We're at the end of March, heading into Easter. Obviously, this episode came out in October of last year, but is it just me, or did anybody assume that the head honcho of the Rainbow Line would look better than the Easter Bunny that I saw 20 years ago when I was little? I'm really confused by this character. Plus, it seems like it's a man in a costume. They don't hide the fact. You actually see his neck, and the head is twisted when he talks to him, something that Ticket actually brings up in the conversation. Now, there are two thoughts here. Is that it is a man who is in a rabbit costume. Why he's in a rabbit costume? Maybe to hide his identity, much in like the Avengers with Sean Connery when they all dressed up as the bears, to kind of hide their identity from people. Or that he is delusioned in somehow thinking he is a rabbit of some kind, which some people have brought up the whole theory about Ticket and Conductor, that Conductor is delusional in some way and you have this puppet. Others believe it's like the ventriloquist, where it's like two different personalities. Or some people basically say, Ticket is his own being. Neither of which is actually brought up in this episode, and we don't really get to know anything about the president of the Rainbow Line other than what he looks like, and he has made the decision to disband the ToQger at the end of the episode, which again is our cliffhanger. Now, what I don't understand about this is, well, here's the thing. The Rainbow Line, up until this point, has given us contradictory information. And I think one of two things is possible, but it's very unlikely both of them are possible, despite the fact that the evidence presented to us in all these episodes seem to suggest both being a possibility and both being right. Here's what I mean. Now, one possibility is that the Rainbow Line is its own separate entity, that before the events that got Wright and all the other ToQger together, it was an established line where it had trains going all across the country, across the world, into outer space, as we established in the Galaxy Line movie, and they're doing all this stuff on their own. What their ultimate end game is, other than defeating the Shadow Line, I'm not sure, because for a paramilitary group, I don't think trains are the most successful defense against evil, because if they are a pre-existing group that can only be seen by children or people with strong imaginations, and they are fighting this constant war against the Shadow Line, I don't understand why they seem to be dealing in stations and passenger trains and things like that. It seems to be counterproductive. The other theory is that they are a manifestation of the imaginations of our five main ToQger. That the reason we haven't seen other people other than Akira, the president, Conductor, and all that is that they are manifestations of the imagination of our five characters. So these trains did not exist before the ToQger, that they are making up with their mind. Again, the movie and several episodes present one view and yet the other, and again, it's contradictory to each other. We don't have the full backstory on what's happening here, because I'm still confused on why we have different stations if there's nobody else involved, because who do we know is part of the Rainbow Line in this episode? At this episode, who is part of the Rainbow Line? Conductor, Ticket, Lady, Wagon, President, and Akira. Only those 6 people in 31 episodes plus the movie are known associates of the Rainbow Line. When they enter the Hyper Ressha terminal in this episode, Wagon goes and says, hey, they have restaurants, they have a library, a movie theater, a gym, and a beauty salon. Yet, when we walk around the terminal, there's no one there. When the ToQger go to the restaurant to eat, I don't see a wait staff, I don't see other customers, I don't see cooks, I don't see anybody in that entire sequence. Again, we only know these 6 people plus our 5 rangers. That's a total of 11 people who are involved with the Rainbow Line in some capacity. But where's everybody else? We know that Akira is the person who's maintaining these lines, or at least one of the people, but we never see anybody else up to this point. That's why I say that this is probably a manifestation of the ToQger's imagination as opposed to an actual place. Because if it was an actual place, then we would see tons of people involved in doing stuff here. And here's the thing. I love the Hyper Ressha terminal. I love the concept of it. And I love the toy, because I got the toy not too long ago. But I don't understand its existence. And here's what I mean. It's established in this episode that the terminal rarely stops and that it rarely appears. That's what Ticket says, is that it rarely appears, and it seems like it'd be a mobile terminal. Now, as we know from the toy, it does turn to like a giant train of its own, so there's an indication that it does move and it's mobile. Probably not unlike the SPD command base in Deca Ranger Power Rangers SPD. But when we look at the wide shot of all the trains coming in to get essentially their baryon sweeps, it seems to be in a fixed location, that it has rail tracks going into other rail tracks. It has all this stuff kind of set up because, here's what I'm getting at. If you've ever been to a train station, like any train station, you know that it's a well-connected network. Well, let's at least say Japanese train station. Kyoto Station in Kyoto, Japan is amazing. It is huge. It has, all the train connections. It's right next to a mall, has the restaurants, the shops, escalators. It has a bus line, taxi cabs. Everything that you could want is in there. That's why it was one of my favorite places to go while I was there. But if you told me that the whole station could up and move to a new location, I would say that makes very little sense. And that's kind of the way that the Hyper Ressha terminal makes very little sense here. If it is the manifestation of the ToQger, it would make sense. But if this is a pre-established entity, then how is it able to take up all this space within a city? I don't have the exact measurements, and I'm sure I can go ahead and look at them, but it seems to me that the Hyper Ressha terminal is about the size of your typical skyscraper, mainly this huge, massive building. How are they able to get this entire structure within a confined space as it is, and yet it is still mobile in some way? I don't particularly get that. Not to mention, I almost think that the Hyper Ressha terminal was ill-conceived in some way. And here's what I mean. Anybody ever read those Star Wars books where it has like a cross-sectional analysis of an AT-AT or an X-Wing where you can look in and somebody drew, this is what the cargo area looks like, this is where they put all the troops, this is what the engine room looks like. You ever seen those kinds of books? I don't think that they designed and built this model for the Hyper Ressha terminal with that in mind. Granted, there is a map of the Hyper Ressha terminal in the episode, but it's really hard to decipher whether that is an actual map that they created or if that is a map that actually belongs to the station which they filmed this in, which I suspect is Tokyo Station, but I don't have any confirmation on that because, nobody answers my questions. Moving on, though, I just find it odd that we have this massive Zord that has a movie theater, a library, and a beauty salon in it. I don't particularly understand why they did that, and when you actually look at the model, you're like, well, where is it? Because it seems like, the thing is, the toy itself is basically hollow, and because it folds up on itself. As we see in this episode, it's completely flat, and it almost suggests that there's an underground portion of the terminal, which would almost be impossible unless it is connected to a station that's already there and the train portion is just the top level. You get where I'm going with this, where it doesn't make a lot of sense, because if nobody can see it and nobody knows of its existence, how is it able to exist within the space that's existing in? That's what I'm trying to go ahead and figure out. And this episode doesn't tell us whether or not they are, what it is. We're not given a further explanation to what the Hyper Ressha terminal, what the Rainbow Line, or the Pass of the ToQger is in this episode. The only other thing that's really presented in this episode that kind of sets up as a mystery is that Wagon, for a brief moment, either she imagines it or sees it. Well, actually, she does not see it. We, the audience, see it. But it seems that the ToQger have transformed into children in a quick scene. And she turns around to realize, hey, that's not what's happening. But we, the audience, see it. Now, we can interpret that in many different ways. And the thing is, we still don't know what's going on with the ToQger and their past visions. So why would they actually appear to the audience as children from, an objective point of view, as opposed to, say, a subjective point of view like Wagon? So I don't know what's going on right there, but I'm hoping they'll go ahead and set up. Now, people have told me some things and what they believe theories are, but until we actually get confirmation in the episode, I'm not going to go ahead and talk about it, because this is a spoiler-free vlog, and it's supposed to take each episode based on itself and what has come before. So I'm not going to go ahead and speculate too much on things people have told me, but it is still questionable what is going on right here. So again, not really sure what's happening, but I hope that is expanded upon. In any case, I really like the episode, and as much as I've been slamming the existence of the Hyper Ressha, I love it. I think it's a great concept because, again, I love train stations. I don't know why, but for some reason, I love train stations and I love airports, yet I don't like to fly. Yeah, go figure that one out. I'm a weird person. But I think it's a great set piece. I hope we come back to this later in the series. I hope this kind of takes over as their new base headquarters, simply because the existing sets we have seem so cramped and restrictive and not as much fun as you think they would be. But in any case, I can't wait for Station 32. I want to see what happens. Are they really disbanded? What does that mean? Simply because, and let me make this final point, then I'll let you guys go. If it is a manifestation of their imaginations, why would they imagine a person who disbands the ToQger? But if it's an existing entity, then they were recruited without their consent, and yet they are now being disbanded. See what I'm saying? Nothing's really clear at this point. So let's continue and let's see what happens there. But in any case, I want to thank you guys for listening. You all have yourself a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.